The other one, can't believe we're doing this again. We did this with cloud, right? Security assessments are after the fact. We're delivering outcomes before we get governance, security, and controls in place. And we had the shared responsibility model with cloud, and we still failed. The other one is oversight versus observability. So being able to see everything. We have lots of oversight controls we have in place today, but really companies are not seeing what their models are doing in production, right? They don't understand the RAG pipeline. They don't understand the assets that come with developing AI and SLMs and LLMs. We've seen one with a major mobile company who put their source code into ChatGPT. We've all heard that story, right? That interaction wasn't monitored. That employee thought they were doing a great thing. But the one thing is they had no control at that level. They couldn't see that interaction with ChatGPT, right? The employee didn't understand the impacts of a public LLM, one that essentially is a learning model, so it's continuously absorbing information that is fed to it. Private models, totally different story, but they put this in a public model, and I've heard some stories about them going and talking to ChatGPT and getting the rollback, which is, they probably paid some good money to get that data out of that database, right? It's not true in cloud, it's not true in AI either. We have to be there as part of that. We need our own layer of security around our models to protect them, to ensure their stability, to ensure their efficacy. So we need to make sure we're not just relying on the model providers and that we're putting security in place where we can, whether it's at point controls or whether it's overall frameworks. We need to get that alignment in place. We're all building these, but even as we build them, we realize we don't have the level of control we need when it comes to some of the models, such as least privilege. We need to control our permissions and our rights, especially when we're building these agents, and understand what they can and cannot do so we can risk model properly. And I always do a 90 and 1 year review and what we can do next. And so within the next 90 days, we can really start to embed AI governance. We can really think about those controls which go beyond traditional frameworks and really start to get them into our practice. We need to deploy runtime controls. So making sure it's more than just gaining visibility, make sure we're actually putting things in place to protect us. So technologies like others out there like Zscaler and Apollo, and get those gateways in place so we can monitor those interactions. All right, let's get started today. Thank you all for joining my session. Just want to talk a little bit today about the AI governance gap, something we all live and breathe every single day, where we realize our current guardrails that we have in place and our controls are not really keeping up with the AI innovation and evolution we're seeing on that end. And so who am I? Why am I here? My name is Kent Stevens. I serve a unique dual role at Trend AI. We'll talk more about what Trend AI is and who we are. But I'm a VP of product management, focusing in on strategy and direction across multiple solutions across our platform. But I'm also the VP of Canada business. So this is a very unique role where I take the learnings and the direction of our product and apply it to a go-to-market strategy for our Canadian customers. And so I've been with Trend now for over 8 years. I focused heavily in security operations development and email development over the last number of years. And I'm based in Toronto, originally from Halifax. I made the move about 6 weeks ago back to Toronto in the middle of winter. Seemed like a great idea at the time to go from 20 degrees Celsius to minus 20 Celsius. Quite a difference. But I want to be immersed in the market here in Canada. I want to be present. And so Trend AI is really the rebrand and the go-to-market when it comes to what Trend Micro is built on over the last 35 years, and everybody probably knows us as Trend Micro. But the rebrand is about really coming to the market and telling organizations what we're really focused on. And Trend has been traditional email and endpoint, and that's where we've been known, and we have that heritage and that core built in our rebrand. But we're really going to focus on AI initiatives. And from an organizational standpoint, our CEO is the most AI positive influencer I've ever met. She wants us to use AI for our people, for our processes, for our development, and even within our products to make sure we're developing features and capabilities to meet our customer needs. And Trend AI is really invested in Canada. over 550 employees in Canada, mostly Ottawa and Toronto based, over 50 threat researchers, a sales team, and then an R&D team built on building the best in breed platform that we have available with Trend Vision 1. But let's get started. Let's set the stage. So we all hear about AI every single day, whether it's from a vendor, whether it's from our employees, whether it's from our own reading, and we constantly hear that. But today we're going to talk about modern AI. Traditional AI, we've known, it's been around. Some people say up to 50 years. We've had patents that are at least 20 years old around machine learning and OCR capabilities. But when we're talking about AI today, we're going to talk about the modern AI, SLMs, LLMs, Gen AI, what we're really seeing and breathing in our daily routines today. And so what we do know and what we are seeing is that risk is really shifting faster than we can keep up with, right? What we do know is that AI is transforming every single industry. So part of my role for the last few years is spending a lot of time meeting with customers and partners. Didn't matter if they were in manufacturing or education or even retail. They're all spending huge on AI initiatives, and they're transforming their business every day. Whether they're enhancements at the people level, making their people more efficient in their jobs, making them more useful, making sure that they're more operationalized, making sure their efficiencies are there, or even in product. And really what this means is we're revolutionizing the way we build, the way we secure, and the way we innovate as organizations. And second is AI is evolving at light speed. We all know that. What we knew 6 months ago is not what we know today. The evolution has been so quick. And when we talk about traditional IT and IS and cybersecurity and data security, we've been all slow to move to catch up. And AI is moving so quickly, we just can't get a hold of where we're at and how we've gotten here. And so we really need to reflect on that journey. And the one big thing we've all noticed is that AI is accessible to everyone. Everyone. If you have a smartphone, Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot, tons of AI applications. We can develop apps in minutes, even seconds these days. It's really evolving. And this is not just about everybody having access, but it's about every organization being able to use AI today. And we see it in the startups, right, where they're evolving and quickly and leveraging cloud platforms to really deliver outcomes. And we're seeing it even with the large enterprises delivering experiences, whether it's in retail and the shopping experience, or whether it's in the marketing experience that we're seeing from companies. It's always evolving. And what we also do know from all of our conversations, and Trend does a lot of threat research, is that it's really defining the future. And really what that means, it's becoming a core enabler for businesses. Businesses are starting to see the value and what AI can bring to the table. And it's driving not only business growth, but the way in which we do cyber defense today. We are seeing huge gains when it comes to the cyber defense industry today, when it comes to automation and optimization within the space. And one thing that we also do know is that AI is moving faster than our governance functions can absorb. We're seeing breakthroughs now in minutes, hours, weeks. We're not seeing it in years. It is moving so quickly. We need to be able to keep up with this speed, and we need to get frameworks in place that we've traditionally seen are built around predictive systems. And with AI, it's very dynamic. It's very probabilistic. It's really dynamic in the context of the data is always changing. Gotta love technology. When it works well. Okay. Did we fail? We failed. So when it comes to AI governance frameworks, right, we're seeing a lot of gaps being exposed. We're seeing lots of research in what we're seeing today. And on the bottom of the slide here, it really tells us where we dove in and got some of these statistics. I don't want to sensationalize. I don't want to bring FUD to the table, but these are some common things in which we're seeing when it comes to talking about AI governance and where we're at today and where we're going. And so some of the realities we're seeing in these conversations is we're seeing around the reality around enforcement versus policy. We see lots of acceptable use AI policies out there talking about how to use it properly, how to interact with it, what the company stipulates it is the safe AI practice. but we're really not seeing that translate into the controls we need to understand the interactions between our employees, our agentic AI capabilities, and different AI applications. That visibility is slowing us down and not allowing us to have a complete understanding of what is happening in the AI space today. The other one is oversight versus observability. So being able to see everything. We have lots of oversight controls we have in place today, but really companies are not seeing what their models are doing in production, right? They don't understand the RAG pipeline. They don't understand the assets that come with developing AI and SLMs and LLMs. And, at Trend, we've developed our own cybersecurity LLM model. It's got a super cool name. I don't know who came up with it, but it's Cybertron. I don't think it's that great, but we all know Dead Planet. Yeah, I get it. But forget about the name. It's about delivering an outcome of delivering cyber intelligence in our 35 years of history at light speed to our customers. We have some very large organizations leveraging that technology to be able to deliver their outcomes when it comes to threat intelligence. And the other component is governance versus risk reduction. We know our government frameworks, whether we're dealing with NIST or we're dealing with any of the others, right? We want to make sure that we have the right level of visibility when it comes to governance and oversight. And we really need to start to shift our mindset from that governance to risk reduction and visibility as we really understand what AI usage is really happening within our organizations, because we really need to gain that level of visibility of what is happening, so we can't just be blind to the fact of what is going on. And so when we dig into a couple of these numbers, the one that stands out here, and we all love those big numbers to sensationalize this, but, when it comes to breaches that we've seen, in the past, we've seen one with a major mobile company who put their source code into ChatGPT. We've all kind of heard that story, right? That interaction wasn't monitored. That employee thought they were doing a great thing. But the one thing is they had no control at that level. They couldn't see that interaction with ChatGPT, right? The employee didn't understand the impacts of a public LLM, one that essentially is a learning model. So it's continuously absorbing information that is fed to it. Private models, totally different story, but they put this in a public model. And I've heard some stories about them going and talking to ChatGPT and getting them to roll back, which is, they probably paid some good money to get that data out of that database, right? So we need to think about those controls, and we need to make sure that security is part of our AI initiatives as we go forward. The other one, I can't believe we're doing this again. We did this with cloud, right? Security assessments are after the fact. We're delivering outcomes before we get governance, security, and controls in place. And we had the shared responsibility model with cloud, and we still fail, right? We've learned from the past, well, we hope we did, but obviously we're still seeing those elements when we talk about security assessments being delivered as part of AI initiatives. Yes, we want those enhancements, and yes, we don't want to miss out on opportunities to make our businesses better. But at the beginning, we have to make sure that security and governance are at the beginning of every project and embedded everywhere. And this is really some findings we see in a lot of organizations where they rush those AI initiatives to market, and then they end up failing because they don't have the governance or the security controls in place to actually deliver the outcome they were looking for in a secure fashion. And so we've all seen the Anthropic attack. We've all read about it. It's all, been part of our dreams for the last little bit, hoping we are not at the end of an attack like that. But what we've learned from those attacks is that adversarial playbook is changing, and it's super messy, understanding the common infrastructure when it comes to AI, right? We do know that, they have complex supply chains. We also know that LLM security is a totally different beast than what we've been dealing with in the past when it comes to common infrastructure. Yes, that layer is under there, but the way in which the infrastructure is built and managed is totally different. So we have to be cognizant of that. We've gone beyond traditional code. We've seen that. One thing we did learn is we did a lot of research. We have some white papers on it already around the Anthropic attack, but there still was a human in the loop. We found human validation steps. They had to keep that attack on track, and they used human inputs to actually drive the attack. So as much as they say it was fully automated, we found elements that said, hey, a human had to interact at these particular points. So even as we think about our AI development and having a human in the loop for that validation, that verification, the adversaries are doing it too. They know that these attacks are very prominent. They know that the value of these attacks, but at the same time, they understand that they need that human element there to obviously manipulate the prompts, because prompt manipulation is real. Everybody who uses AI knows that. You can manipulate the prompt to get the behavior and the output you're looking for. The adversaries know this too, and that's really part of the human element, even in their attacks, where they can use the LLM, they can modify it, they can actually modify the input to get the output they are looking for. And another thing that has crept up is our good friends over at OWASP have got us out a new class of vulnerabilities, right? Which is always fun. Good reading, good things to really ingest and understand. But when we look at the top 10 of OWASP and how it's evolved, Trend is very much involved in the vulnerability management game. We have our 0-Day Initiative, which is the largest bug bounty program on the planet, who helps feed this program also. But essentially, OWASP is doing good things. They want us to recognize, but this is another area where we need to focus and understand what those attacks look like, what those attack paths look like, what applications are vulnerable. What are we doing in this space to make sure that we're protected against these potential vulnerabilities? And over the last 18 months at Trend, we've had lots of conversations. CISOs, VLEs, very large companies. We've talked to the vendors, other vendors. We talked to analyst relations. And what we're really seeing is a couple areas in which they're really focusing from the adversarial standpoint on really high value outcomes. The biggest one is prompt injection and jailbreaking at scale. We're seeing this type of attack constantly. We're starting to see it. And this goes beyond traditional business logic, right? There's no malware signature, right? There's no CVE. There's no patch cycle for this. This is manipulation at the prompt level, making sure they're injecting what they want to get the outcome they're looking to achieve. And then the other one we've seen a lot is data and model poisoning, right? Injecting data into pipelines, RAG workflows, manipulating SharePoint sites, manipulating Jira sites, manipulating Confluence. So when those RAG workflows are triggered, they're either getting hallucination-inducing contents, they're getting outright malicious content, right? But it's modifying in which the way the model works, and we're seeing model drift with that, right? It's not coming back with the output we're looking to achieve, and we're seeing it more. And the biggest one we've seen a lot lately is the agentic workflow modifications happening, where they are going to SharePoint and modifying what we call RAG corpses, right? Those are the remnants of your RAG actually doing a lookup and bringing back the data set, right? Those are assets that a lot of organizations are not looking at to protect. But when you think about what you give AI access to from a data perspective, that corpse has a lot of information in it, and that corpse needs to be protected, whether it's deleted instantly, whether it's protected through endpoint control capabilities. We need to make sure we know where those remnants are in our RAG pipelines. But from other conversations we've had, we've seen other gaps appear when it comes to actual AI and modern AI. So the biggest one is model misalignment. And what that really means is that most companies rely on the model's provider to provide the security. It's not true in cloud. It's not true in AI either. We have to be there as part of that. We need our own layer of security around our models to protect them, to ensure their stability, to ensure their efficacy. So we need to make sure we're not just relying on the model providers, and that we're putting security in place where we can, whether it's at point controls or whether it's overall frameworks. We need to get that alignment in place. And the biggest thing we see here is the ungovernance of third-party Gen AI apps. I've heard from multiple large organizations, policy has been just to block AI. Everybody's got a cell phone. I mean, come on. We're all smart. Let's use some common sense. We have to understand that dynamic. They're pulling out their phones. They're putting our corporate data into ChatGPT, into Copilot, into Claude. They're gaining these huge efficiencies. They're getting these great reports. They're also sharing our IP, and we're not governing it. We're kind of turning a blind eye to it today, right? We need to enable them. We need them to understand the impacts and the risks. So not only is it a control game and a feature game, but it's also an enablement game. They need to understand what a public LLM is. And if us as organizations are not enabling them, it's our fault. It's a risk that we take on. We need to be the enablers when it comes to AI governance and what the impacts to our organization is. Nobody wants to be on the mic at CBC describing how their database was breached because one of their employees put it into ChatGPT and some researcher over at Trend AI exported it, because it's very easy. This is prompt manipulation. You can find the data sets very easily, right? So getting those guardrails in place to make sure that data can't be extracted in the way you want is very important. So understanding and seeing third-party Gen AI use in your environment. And like I spoke about a minute ago, those RAG assets, if you are building and you're having as RAG as part of the functionality of whatever AI application you're building, there are assets that we need to focus on that are outside of the norm in which we haven't seen in traditional development and in application development. And the other thing is non-existent agent controls. We're seeing organizations treat critical users and critical endpoints as SaaS widgets and not critical systems that they need to monitor and protect. And so we're all building agents these days. Everybody, I know if you're technical, I built my own agents, right? I have a Copilot agent, pulls all my summary of everything I've done in the last week, sends it to me for human validation so that I can send it off to my boss to say, here's all the updates on Canadian business unit and my product development teams and what's happening there. Don't have to spend an hour of my life. We're all building these. But even as we build them, we realize we don't have the level of control we need when it comes to some of the models, such as least privilege. We need to control our permissions and our rights, especially when we're building these agents, and understand what they can and cannot do so we can risk model properly. So we need to get those agent controls in place. And so this is a very popular blueprint that we've built. My good friend Fernando Cardozo focuses on our AI initiatives, focuses on our partnerships with NVIDIA, but also focuses on the use cases that our customers are bringing to us as they develop their AI applications. So as you can see, the AI stack is really changing the way in which things will be built and go forward. You've all heard of AI factories. It's really just another data center that has some AI GPUs in it. It's a really fancy name. We've actually spun off our own company to work with NVIDIA and some other partners to build these globally. But essentially, this AI stack will be a big part of those secure factories and those smart factories that we're seeing. And so when we look at this, we understand this is not the traditional infrastructure, the traditional, things we've been protecting with our current governance and frameworks that we have in place. This is changing the game. And some organizations who I talk to still don't understand the basics of what happens in an AI world, right? They don't understand what's under the hood, right? Really, AI is two major components. Identities and agents need to be treated as identities in your practice. That's something we all have to evolve to, is agents are identities. And data is the biggest thing and the biggest part. We've been doing data for a number of years. If we think about the traditional AI functionality that we've talked about, OCR and predictive machine learning, that's fingerprinting based off data. We've really evolved what we can do with the data. And this really tells us in how our users, the adversaries, and our customers interact with AI functionality we build within our corporations. But one reality continues to surface as I talk to big banks, talk to governments. They're all trying to govern AI with PDS. Bunch of policies. This is really what they're doing, right? I mean, we can all laugh. There's an element of it in what we're doing every day, right? We know this, right? But we really have to take it and flip that to enforcement. We need to change the mindset of just gathering acceptable use PDFs and documents and really turning it into enforceable controls, right? We need to operationalize the governance that we need to put in place. And I believe it was an MIT research paper that came out recently. It gave some extravagant number, like 95% of all AI initiatives fail. That's crazy. I mean, we've all watched it. Every CEO at all of our organizations is like AI, and security is like, hold on. We need to secure this. We need to see exactly where our data is going. But the biggest thing is shadow AI is actually outpacing shadow IT today. It's absolutely crazy what we're seeing in organizations. We're seeing business units spin up projects in minutes, getting the outcome they want, and then realizing they have no security. They have no governance. They have no control. It serves the outcome, but doesn't match the level of security we need to have survivable innovation in organizations. So we need to really move the needle from paperwork to operationalization of those models. And so one of my favorite CISOs I get to talk to a lot is a gentleman down in Florida. He actually works at a multinational university. They cover 5 continents today. They have universities all around the world. And I spoke to him. He said, hey, what are you doing? And how are you really applying governance? Because obviously NIST and the others are not really keeping up and evolving fast enough. So what are you doing from a framework perspective? So one is he really had to understand the supply chain of AI and how it really works, how those models work, how the fine tuning, how the prompts. He had to really understand that supply chain. It's different than what we know today from traditional IT supply chains, but really get around that training data, get that integrity up, and basically be able to get some visibility. The other is safe model interaction, which we see constantly and we hear about, right? We know our employees are talking to ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude, but what they're doing in those interactions, we have very little visibility into, and we need to increase that visibility. So we need to get functionality in place so that we can proxy that communication, ensure that communication is not leaking intellectual property, but really a safe model that is interacting. You know, we've heard about some of these models which have very personal outputs, right? Some people think AI is your friend, right? This is people in our world today. And I mean, we're seeing these models suggest things like suicide, ideation. We need to make sure that even the input or the output is protecting the employee or whatever asset is interacting with that application. And then we really need to start to govern third-party AI usage. This starts with education. We need to make sure as part of our onboarding and education, if we're going to embrace AI at the organizational level, we need to educate at the organizational level. We need to assume they know nothing, right? The average user today sees the enhancements of ChatGPT when they put it in. We all know the output's got lots of dashes, right? Got some words that nobody ever uses, right? But the smart ones actually tell the output to talk like an 8th grader, remove the dashes, stop putting emblems, stop using icons. So it's becoming harder and harder as they customize it. But one thing we need to do is educate them, and we need to get as much visibility, whether those gateways are in place, right? What other controls we can put to gain insight into what apps they're using. But let's start with conversation and education and enable them on what ChatGPT really is. Everybody treats it like Google. We all know it's way more powerful than that, right? And then really protect those RAG components and those app layers. Make sure we're focusing in on that entire pipeline, right? Making sure our entire software development lifecycle is thought about as we go through these AI initiatives, and invest and ensure we have controls where we need to feel comfortable with the acceptable risk in our organizations. And then the one that Johnny, he's a former military guy, so he's always about action, right? So Johnny always says to me, it just can't be outputs. You actually have to start enforcing. You need to start embedding governance everywhere as you build and develop AI initiatives. And so the other thing I always asked him is, what did you do today? And Johnny is very well versed in AI and how he's been building it. You know, he lived through the cloud era. He was a CISO at that time. But the biggest thing is we need to acknowledge the shift. You know, we're still seeing naysayers in our industry. It's happening. I actually had a conversation with Ali Mellon last week. She's the analyst at Forrester who does XDR and security operations. She's been a naysayer against AI from the beginning. I used to actually handle the demos between us and the analysts years ago, and I'd pop open her chat bot and I'd enter the same question that was already in the prompt because I knew the output would be solid. She'd say, what is that? That doesn't serve any value. Like that, you're doing an extra step. It's not efficient, right? It's really just you using Clippy 2.0 is what she referred to it as, right? If those who know Clippy, it's Clippy 2.0. You're really not gaining any efficiencies, but she's acknowledged that shift and she's really embraced it, and she's seeing operational efficiencies very quickly. She actually shared a story where there is a vendor similar to Trend that has actually gone out there and they've eliminated L1 and L2 in their security team, which is absolutely crazy. So that means triage, that means investigation, that means prioritization is all being automated. And what their analyst is being delivered is, here is the playbook we just triggered. This is the action we're looking to do. And here's the information. So they're being absolutely hammered with information to make sure that they can make an intelligent decision while still having a human in the loop. When I was a SOC lead, 15 years ago, I would love for that. They brought me ArcSight, was going to fix all my security problems, became a dumping ground for logs. I never really got anywhere. No EDR back then. We had no EDR silence, and all those guys were just coming on the market doing POCs with us. But we need to acknowledge that there is going to be some efficiencies that we can drive from the workflows, especially in the investigation side of things. The other is inventory all your AI usage. That really allows us to set the bar. If you think that blocking it at the firewall has really stopped it in your organization, let's be honest, it hasn't. It's actually just got them to think of other ways to get around it. So educate, enable, but also inventory. Understand the models that you're using, whether it's Claude, GPT, OpenAI. Make sure you understand the Gen I applications, right? Our owner, Eva, who's our CEO, when DeepSeek came out, right? Everybody was like, don't touch that. Read the T's and C's. Says it's going back to a server in China. Do not put our intellectual property. These government's going to get it. So we get this email from our risk team saying, do not put it on any corporate asset. And then the product management team got a second email from Eva saying, we have an infrastructure that we want you to use it on, right? So even she knew the value of just testing DeepSeek and seeing the efficiencies we could gain from it as we built our own models. But she wanted us to use it, but in a very controlled fashion and put some guardrails in place. You could get it off our main network, but use those capabilities. The other is identify those blind spots. And we constantly see these in organizations today is once you get that inventory, once you have an idea of what is happening inside of the environment, is really to identify what you can't see, whether it's the interactions with the end users and the Gen AI models, or whether it's within your own interior infrastructure. We want to be able to have tools and capabilities to continuously understand what's going on in the background, so that if you don't know about a project, you still get visibility in the infrastructure that may be spun up in AWS or Azure or GCP or even on-prem within those environments. And I always do a 90 and 1 year review and what we can do next. And so within the next 90 days, we can really start to embed AI governance. We can really think about those controls which go beyond traditional frameworks and really start to get them into our practice. We need to deploy runtime controls. So making sure it's more than just gaining visibility. Make sure we're actually putting things in place to protect us. So technologies like others out there like Zscaler and Apollo, and get those gateways in place so we can monitor those interactions. Trend also has that functionality. But the biggest thing is prioritize high-risk AI, right? We want to make sure that when our users are leveraging AI in our infrastructure and within our networks, is we know exactly where the high-risk AI is and how we can actually control some of that risk in our organizations. And so we see this even with my DeepSeek example, right? We made sure that, hey, we don't want it on our corporate devices, but we will control it and use it in a network that is off of our corporate area so that we're not interfering with our corporate data and there's no chance of us crossing networks. So prioritizing the high risk. I love technology. And then what can we do for the next 12 months? Well, we can take it just from embedding to operationalize, making sure it's part of everything we do in the security development life cycle. And then we can move to continuous enforcement. Starts with visibility, starts with the point controls, but continuously evolve. We're seeing things on the market today like deepfake detector. Right? We need to have the ability. We're seeing deep fakes. We've heard of all the finance scams of some CFO being spoofed. They got video. I mean, we could train our end users to actually have some accountability and have some ability to make decisions, simple as turning your head. Those types of things, spatula, like it's a wrap. Like we know that with face, right? We know that. So we can teach them. So beyond just even having that continuous enforcement of having endpoint capabilities to detect these types of sessions, but also educate our users in the basics of how deepfake really works, right? And then last is really align leadership with the board. And this is where I find a lot of organizations fail. It's really about tying the outcomes of your AI initiatives to the controls and the growth that your business wants to see. It needs to be an enabler, right? We don't want to be left behind. No CISO or no CEO wants FOMO, right? They don't want the fear of missing out. This is why they're pushing all these AI initiatives. But we need to be on the same page. From security to the board, we need to be moving in the same direction so we can eliminate as much shadow AI as we need to make sure we have that level of acceptable risk, but also that level of visibility. And when it comes to AI, standards do matter, right? At Trends, we were known as the humble giant. The New York Times called us that many years ago, right? We like to invest heavily in our threat research. We don't like to brag too much about what we do, but we have Pwn to Own, we have zero-day initiative. But when you look at some of these standards, Trend has actually been a co-author in all of them. They've been part of the groundwork we've done to build the foundations of these standards. And when it comes to policy development, we've also been crucial in getting those policies out. We signed on to the Responsibility Act of Europe very quickly for AI. We wanted to make sure that even when we developed with AI within our platform, it was ethical. We do not want more information than we need to make outcomes. So if you were to enter some kind of identifiable information into one of our Gen AI capabilities, we actually filter that in before it ever hits our database. And we also put it back together and reconstruct on the output. So employee names, IP addresses, we want to be part of that ethical approach to AI. And so one thing is we actually got our first AI cybersecurity patent. It's actually secured by a Canadian. And so the patent itself is around chat detection and response. It's the interaction between employees and the AI applications. His name is David Gerard. He's based in Montreal. He's been very forward in how we approach AI with a very secure approach, making sure the innovation in organizations can survive the innovation that they bring to the table. And really what that said is that we know that interaction is crucial. Nobody wants to be Samsung, right? Nobody wants to be them explaining how their employee decided they were going to do some development code efficiencies, but really give away our source code, right, into a model. So that really underpins everything we've done when it comes to AI and making sure that we are prominent in the space. But as Trend AI within the rebrand says, is we're going to focus on AI security with the traditional heritage of what we have from Trend Micro and really being front and center when it comes to building the foundation of responsible usage. We want to be there as part of the conversation. And so just one last point, just before I sign off here, the AI governance gap isn't a failure of policy, really. We have policy. We're really good at policy. It's just a mismatch in speed, where the evolution of AI innovation is happening so quickly that our frameworks cannot evolve fast enough to keep up. And we're going to continue to move and make gains, but we have to understand that there are going to be some things that we are not seeing. There are adversarial tactics today that do not map to any existing framework. And that is going to continue to happen as we see the innovation in AI. And we have to really reflect on that and adjust for it as we build our guardrails in place. And so, got a couple QR codes here. It was brave. Anyone? Anyway, you don't need to. We'll share the URLs with you later. I hope you don't scan them. Really, it just really tells me your level of security. I wouldn't scan them either. But we have a couple pieces of we have a couple white papers here available for you guys, right? Really, at the end of the day, it's really that AI security blueprint, understanding that infrastructure, the levels of security you can put in place as point controls. And then secondly, securing the future, which is actually our interaction with OWASP and those top 10 vulnerabilities when it comes to Gen AI and LLMs. And this tells our approach to it and how you can use our solutions to help you gain visibility into those vulnerabilities and how you can apply them across your entire software development lifecycle. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. Not a lot of time for Q&A, but if you want to, we can chat more at the booth. If there's anything you'd like to take up, I do appreciate it. We can talk about governance and AI and your AI strategies. But really, I want to thank you for joining and appreciate you guys spending your time with me today. Thank you so much.